Warner Animation Group, next to maybe like Illumination, is probably the animation studio with the most divisive films. And yeah, they're really inconsistent with the quality of their films, in my opinion. And they do have a lot of history behind them, so let's talk about them. If we want to talk about their history, we'll have to talk about something that happened way before they were founded, and that's Warner Bros. Feature Animation, the predecessor to the studio. They were pretty successful during the 90s. They made classics such as The Iron Giant and, surprisingly enough, Space Jam. They were doing pretty good for themselves during the 90s, but then the early 2000s came and yeah, it was not a kind era, let me tell you. Their first release was Osmosis Jones, a live-action animation hybrid similar to Space Jam. It had a $70 million budget and only managed to make back $14 million in the worldwide box office, losing almost $50 million for the studio. 2 years later, Looney Tunes Back in Action came out, and seeing as Space Jam was an unexpected success, Warner expected this one to be as, if not more successful. And when it came out, it flopped. Who would have guessed? This was Warner Bros.' second animated flop in a row. It had an $80 million budget and only managed to make back $68 million in the worldwide box office. Seeing as their two past films flopped, Warner didn't make any animated films for the next decade.
I love this song.
Everything is awesome.
And yeah, a decade after Back in Action released, here's where Warner Animation Group comes in. In January 2013, they were founded, and the year after that, they released their very first film, the Lego Movie. Now, they marketed the Lego Movie really well, and had some really popular names on the cast, but even when it released, it surpassed almost every expectation the studio had, making almost $470 million in the box office, almost 8 times its budget. And its reception did not disappoint either. Critics adored the movie. Shortly after it released, the studio greenlit many other Lego movies, including the Lego Batman and Ninjago movies, which we'll get to later on. Now, following the success of the Lego Movie, people were really excited to see what Warner Animation Group would make next. Like, the movie after Lego Movie had some really big shoes to fill, and Storks did not really fill those shoes. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't a flop by any means. It had a $70 million budget and made just over $180 million in the box office. And its reception was pretty decent, but it was nowhere near as successful as the Lego Movie. Now, personally, I find Storks to be pretty good, but definitely not great. Why did it underperform, you might ask? Well, other than it being poorly marketed, 2016 was a packed year for animation. There were films coming out left and right. But hey, that's just my guess. Anyway, Stork's underperforming was nowhere near the end for Warner Animation Group. 5 months or so after the release of Storks, the Lego Batman movie released. Now, fortunately, it wasn't a flop, but it didn't do great. Their first film was still their highest grossing film. But the Lego Batman did still do pretty good at the box office. It had an $80 million budget and made over $310 million. And its reception was really good, but still, Warner Animation Group had only made 3 movies up until that point, and one of them was a sequel, sort of, spin-off, whatever. Not even Illumination made another installment to one of their franchises 3 movies in. Okay, I'll stop the Illumination comparisons, but this was the first movie, in my opinion, where Warner Animation Group showed that they cared more about money than they do the quality of their films. Not saying Lego Batman is a bad movie, I actually find it to be pretty good, but they could have made an animated film that would change the medium of animation forever. But no, they went with an easy success like this movie. The same year the Lego Batman movie released, the Lego Ninjago movie released. Now this is where people started being tired of Lego movies. Not only did it flop in the box office, but Warner Animation Group made 4 movies up until that point, and 3 were Lego movies. Like, come on. Its reception also wasn't the best. It had mixed reception. Personally, I haven't seen it in like 2 years or so, but I remember it being mediocre. But still, this is a perfect example for my statement about Warner Animation Group caring more about money than the quality of their films. Seeing as this one flopped, their next film wasn't a Lego movie. Can you believe it? It's a miracle. And a Christmas miracle at that. Well, sorta. The film takes place in winter, so close enough. Smallfoot released in late September of 2018, and it did similarly to Storks in terms of its finances. Not a flop, but far from a success. And just like Storks, its reception was alright. My problem with this film is that I actually forgot it existed after like 2 minutes of watching it. I watched it in early May, and I'm not lying. I forgot it existed for like 2.5 months before checking the list of Warner Animation Group films to make this video. Like, Storks, I sort of remembered because I actually cared about the characters in that film. But this movie is just so forgettable. It does nothing to make it memorable. I think the film is mediocre, leaning towards being bad, but still, it's easily the most forgettable film the studio has made, even till now. And then in early 2019 came the Lego Movie 2. Its reception was slightly worse than the first movie and Batman, but it still was really good. I wish I could say the same for its finances. Just like the film that came before it, the Lego Movie was so close to being a flop. And it didn't do good enough to warrant any more Lego movies, as after it underperformed, Warner Animation Group cancelled any plans for an upcoming Lego Movie 3 or spin-off. The Lego Batman Movie 2 was in production, but got cancelled due to this movie underperforming at the box office. I find the Lego Movie 2 to be bad. Not awful, but just bad. But even if I consider it bad, it's the last Warner Animation Group that had charm, that was easy to watch. The year after, Scoop came out, and it was an attempt at some sort of Hanna-Barbera cinematic universe, and it did pretty good in terms of money. It did great on VOD and had some pretty decent DVD sales, but its reception was pretty bad. This is the era where Warner Animation Group started becoming worse and worse. This is where they proved they didn't care about anything but money. And partially, I don't think that's even Warner Animation Group's fault. It's more the executives at Warner Bros. Giving them films like Scoob or Tom and Jerry to make. And yeah, their upcoming films after Scoob until like 2023 are all based off of properties Warner Brother owns. So that says a lot, doesn't it? It doesn't feel like a Scooby-Doo movie. I didn't grow up with Scooby-Doo as much as I did, say, Tom and Jerry or the Looney Tunes, but I could tell this was less of a Scooby-Doo movie and more of a lame excuse for an easy cash grab superhero movie featuring the Scooby-Doo characters. The year after Scoob came Tom and Jerry, and this is an abysmal movie, in my opinion, and its reception was awful. But that didn't stop it from becoming a pretty big success. They haven't revealed the HBO Max numbers, but I'm pretty sure it did great on there as well. And it has the same problem as Scoob. It doesn't feel like a Tom and Jerry movie. It feels like the Royal Gate Hotel movie featuring Tom and Jerry. The conflict is so boring and the film itself has very little of Tom and Jerry considering they're in the title. And other than that, it's at least 20 minutes too long for a movie about Tom and Jerry. I mean, if you're gonna make a movie about like 90-year-old cartoons, at least stay faithful to said 90-year-old cartoon. The bits with Tom and Jerry are actually pretty good, but everything else bores me to death. But as much as I and most of the human population dislike the movie, it still succeeded. And to be honest, that's really all a business like Warner Bros. Cares about nowadays, especially with their animated films. After Tom and Jerry came their newest film at the moment I'm recording this, Space Jam: A New Legacy. Now, Space Jam succeeded, why not make a sequel to it 25 years later? To be honest, I'm not really sure what Space Jam 2 is. It's not a sequel. I'm pretty sure it's its own thing, but whatever. The film, as I'm recording this, is doing really good at the box office, but just like Tom and Jerry, its reception was just awful. And yeah, I saw this film in cinemas and thought it was kinda bad, but still, Warner Bros. Just makes whatever will make them money, I guess. Especially considering a few of their past movies have flopped, so I really hope after their two upcoming movies that are announced, they go back to making some pretty good movies. Well, no, more importantly, some original movies. As of right now, they have two upcoming films announced. One of them is a DC Super Pets movie. Why? Like, the cast is so star-studded, and for what? A movie about superhero dogs? And after that, we have Coyote versus Acme. I think I said that right. It's another Looney Tunes movie about Wile E. Coyote. Again, why? Like, Space Jam 2 isn't doing amazing at the box office. And based off the look of it, this one won't do as well either. It doesn't have Bugs Bunny or Daffy Duck for the marketing. It's just a movie about Wile E. Coyote, one of the less popular Looney Tunes characters. But yeah, I just hope after the Wile E. Coyote movie, they just go back to making some nice, original, fun-to-watch movies. I find their past three films to be just a chore to get through. And their two upcoming ones sort of look the same. But yeah, whatever. This is the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, Please consider leaving a like and commenting down below telling me your thoughts on Warner Animation Group. But I have to go now. Goodbye and stay safe.